welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne. I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their creative process, motivations, likes and dislikes. This time I'm talking to Brynn Alise Scmidt about her stunning landscape and wildlife photography. Brynn is a photographer who loves adventure, nature and wildlife, which you will see through her images. She's also a passionate advocate for conservation. Brynn and her husband have raised their boys since they were toddlers in the outdoors and have spent a lot of time in the mountains and at the beach. They live in Boulder, Colorado, and spend most of their time in the western states, Southern California and Maui. Her family spends a lot of time in nature with photography, rock climbing, camping, hiking, backpacking, snowshoeing and cross-country skiing. Brynn is also a writer for the Outbound Collective. We talk about how she's taught herself photography through trial and error and how she's overcome her initial struggles with understanding her gear to create beautiful art images. We also touch on the impact of crowds in many locations and even some wilderness areas due to overexposure on social media, along with a whole lot more. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, Brynn. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to me today. It's an absolute pleasure having you on the show. So why don't we start with what got you started in photography and landscape photography in particular?
Okay. So I've been doing photography for about 7 years now, probably. It's kind of a long story how I got into it, so I'll try to keep it a little bit briefer. But my husband was a photographer, and he, kind of started acquiring all the gear, especially for wildlife. And we had 2 young boys. And so on all of our trips, we do a lot of trips in national parks, public lands, just a lot of outdoor stuff. And so I would usually be like wrangling the boys while he was taking photos. And I was just happy to do that. And it was really funny because he really tried to teach me to do photography. I remember this, we used to rent this house each summer in up near Glacier National Park for a month. And so we'd spend our evenings and weekends in the park. And I totally remember him sitting me down at the table and like drawing out, explaining aperture to me. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't get it. I've got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. This is not on my agenda. And and so we kind of just did that, had a really active life. And then I got into photography. We clearly had the gear. There's a couple ways. One way is I kind of actually just started with my iPhone. My son ended up getting Lyme disease and was really sick. And he was in bed for 3 years. And during that time, I needed to do something to keep myself from falling apart every day. And so I started this gratitude journal where I just did 3 things a day I was thankful for. And within like a month, I was like taking pictures of those things and just kind of creating a journal with it. And so suddenly I'm taking photos with my iPhone. I'm starting to try to set composition. I've always known that I like to take pictures with my phone but I got more interested. And then as he got better and my older son was a little older too, my husband is a big rock climber, and we kind of raised them climbing. But then during that phase, we didn't really get out. And then he started taking them out climbing a lot more. Okay. And I just love being in nature. I love being with wildlife. I love hiking, everything. And so I think they were gone. I don't remember if they were gone just all day or for a weekend, but I just took all the gear. I had no idea what I was doing, but I took the gear. I have these big wildlife lenses, and I went up to Rocky Mountain National Park and found a herd of about 8 male bighorn sheep up on Trail Ridge Road, like 11,000 feet. And I just got the gear out and I sat there for like 2 hours with them. I have a few that came out okay, considering I really didn't know what, I was. That's cool. I came back and I was hooked. I mean, I literally, it took that one evening of going out, sitting behind a camera and realizing that the entire world went away while I sat there.
Yeah.
And, whether it's wildlife or landscape, it's, as soon as you put that camera in front of you, it's like just everything else fades away. And so
the concentration takes over.
Yeah.
The concentration on the task takes over from everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think just like all the anxiety I deal with and the stress, everything was just gone. And I just had the most amazing time by myself.
Yeah.
And I think at that point I hadn't had a lot of alone time in a while. And that was, I think, in August. And then by late September, I was planning my first solo trip to Grand Tetons in Yellowstone.
Wow. Okay.
And kind of took off from there.
Cool. So you sort of started out with wildlife, obviously, because your husband was into that. So why moving into landscape? And I mean, you do both, obviously. Looking at your portfolio, it's quite a mix. I guess two things. Why move into landscape, but then also what do you see as being the major differences between the two in terms of that process and the motivations behind it?
So wildlife is my passion, and that just has to do with my background too. I graduated from college with a degree in environmental planning and worked for, my mentor had written part of the Endangered Species Act for the United States government. And so I was very involved in that. I've always loved animals and wildlife. So that's a real natural fit for me. And that's probably what I love the most, but it's also a lot harder for, I can go out in the morning and hope to find a moose, an elk, whatever, but it is easier to plan when you're out to pick your landscape spot and go there and shoot. And I just found that I loved both of them, I'm not a morning person, so sunrise is hard for me. But once I'm up, I love being there. It's just getting up that is so hard for me.
Sure.
But once I'm up and set up at a spot and blue hour hits, and I'm so content and so happy. And I love just trying different compositions. I found that over time, I've been using my telephoto lens a lot more for landscape than I did in the beginning. I just always went wide angle, and I still love that. I mean, when I'm up in the Tetons a lot, capturing those mountains with a wide angle lens, and a reflection is still my most favorite thing. But I do a lot of telephoto landscape shots now too. And just like, I really have kind of fallen in love with the more intimate landscape you can get if you kind of, pick an area that you're just attracted to and drawing on that.
You go where the light's right and just focus.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think doing both, you're pretty flexible too. I often start out my morning at a sunrise landscape spot. And then as soon as I've grabbed some shots there, I'm in my car and I'm off looking for, depending on where I am, what kind of wildlife I'm looking for. You either find it or you don't. And along the way, you find something else, the light with the trees are so beautiful here. I'm stopping here. I think I'm very much I let the environment lead me more than, I'll pick my sunrise spot, but from there, I'm generally the light and animals lead me.
Okay. I was going to ask about the planning side of things and how you go about it. So obviously you're picking a sunrise spot. So, but what sort of planning do you put into it? Are you sort of planning months ahead for the sun to appear between two peaks or something like that, or are you a little more relaxed?
I am definitely not that type of photographer. It's really funny. I often talk about that I'm a very impatient person. And so a lot of that really detailed planning and everything, it's just not natural to me. Sure. But what's funny is that in wildlife photography, you have to be incredibly patient. And I have found that I have the patience to sit and wait for a grizzly bear to come out for 5 hours. And yet I can't plan in advance for a shot. So I don't know why that is, but somehow my impatience plays into that. So I do not plan ahead by months. I do not plan my shots. I kind of, I go by season. I obviously look at my weather and figure out if it's, if I think it's going to be clear or not, if I'm obviously always hoping for at least partial clouds and So I'll do that, but I mean, I I don't know, maybe this isn't a good thing as a photographer, but often it's literally the night before that I'm like, I'm going up to the park tomorrow. I have a free morning. I can go. If the weather's good, I'm going, check the weather, look at everything. If it looks horrible, I don't go. If it looks pretty good, I'm shooting up there. It's only 45 minutes. And then generally, I'm just kind of picking my spot as I drive half the time. So I'm not a planner with my photography. And I don't know if that comes from the wildlife aspect of, I'll set out at sunrise and I'll skip a sunrise location because I'm going to try to find a grizzly bear that I know was in a certain area.
Yeah, right.
The day before. And, I can spend 2 hours and never find it. So I think I'm just really used to kind of figuring it out as I go.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, I guess.
Yeah. So I guess I do it with landscapes too, but
yeah. So in terms of what about longer trips, like you mentioned the trip to Yellowstone or the Grand Tetons. If you're planning something like that, are you taking the time to think about what the conditions are going to be like other than just the general seasonal, autumn, winter stuff?
I am, but that one's really hard here. I don't know what it's like for you in Australia, but we have to, if I want a campsite or a lodge, I have to do that way in advance.
Yeah. So it depends on where you go, but if you want to book something, then particularly this weekend is Easter when we're recording this. So
right.
If you haven't booked months ahead, exactly, they're not getting a spot.
Yeah. And so that's how it is here. And when we go as a family or just with my husband, I'll go camp on just public land. But I want to be in a campsite. Yeah. Or when I'm alone, I sleep in we have a Suburban and we have a mattress in there, so I can just camp in that, or lodge in the park. So I'm generally booking that 4 to 5 months in advance.
Yeah, right.
So I've found that I'm kind of stuck with what I have with weather, which is hard. But I also, have a part-time job. I have to photography's part-time. My other job's part-time. So I do have to plan for that. And I generally have my spots fairly picked out for sunrise. Sunset, I'm really flexible. I'm always just looking at what the light's doing, if it's even worth it or not. A lot of times I'm making that split decision in the evening of, is this going to be a great landscape night or should I just be looking for wildlife?
Right.
And that has also driven me to almost quitting photography because it is really hard having two focuses and constantly, pulling between.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about that and how you deal with that? The stretching in two different directions.
Well, this past summer, I wasn't dealing with it well at all. I was up in Yellowstone and I was like, I have to quit one of them. Like, I absolutely have to give up landscape or wildlife because this isn't working. I'm exhausted. Yeah. I don't stop. I don't, it's like, I just go all day. And in my mind's going back and forth between what I want to do that night, the next morning, based on, the evening before. And, and so I have found it's, it can be difficult to have two focuses like that. But for the most part, I think the way I generally do it, if it's like elk, moose, things like that, I may decide I'll generally look for them right after I do sunrise somewhere. If I've been in an area in Yellowstone or the Tetons and was like watching or photographing a grizzly bear, or I know there's a wolf pack in that area, and we know they were there that evening, I'll forego sunrise to get there before dawn.
Yeah, right.
To try to get the wildlife that are harder to photograph.
Yeah. So which
is probably why I'm flexible, is, maybe why I'm not such a planner is, day by day, hour by hour, I'm figuring out kind of what I want to do based on where wildlife is and if there is any or not.
Fair enough. I know this might sound odd being on a landscape photography show, but talk to me a little bit about the wildlife side of things, and particularly things like how you when you're out on your own, how you deal with safety and that sort of thing. Because I think some of those things, particularly in the US, and Australia has its reputation for dangerous animals as well. But to be honest, I think the humans are more dangerous than most of the animals. But
right. I always joke that I carry bear spray, and it's not for the bears.
So how do you keep yourself safe?
Well, I mean, I think that's it. I mean, obviously depends on the area you're shooting in, but here, if you're going to be, I do spend a lot of time in Montana, Wyoming, where I love grizzly country. That's where I want to spend most of my time. It doesn't really matter whether you're a wildlife photographer or a landscape photographer. You have to be planning for that encounter that could happen, especially when you're out at dawn and dusk and in the dark. So, I've kind of learned it doesn't matter whether I'm shooting landscape or wildlife. I have to be prepared, for a bear to walk into the area I'm in. So it's definitely carrying bear spray and learning, making noise when you're going in. It is, sometimes it's a little spooky to be generally a lot of the places, there'll be more people by the time sunrise hits, especially when you're going in fall and, there's people around. But there's one spot that I like to go to that even in fall, when there could be 100 photographers lined up at one spot along the river, I'll go to this lake that I love, and I'll be the only person there.
Yeah, right.
And I love it. I love sitting there, and I can hear the elk bugling in the distance, and I'm doing landscape photography, but I'm constantly, glancing around and making enough noise so that animals know I'm there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's an important one, whether, landscape or wildlife. You kind of need to be ready for what might be in your surroundings, it's snakes or sharks or grizzly bears.
I know a few underwater photographers that have to deal with sharks a little bit more than I do, but
that's not an issue for me generally.
So talk to me a little bit about your local area. You're based in Colorado, correct? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm in Boulder, Colorado. Mm-hmm. So we kind of sit at the foothills, and behind them are the Rocky Mountains. So I'm really only about a 45-minute drive from Rocky Mountain National Park. So that's, I really consider that kind of my backyard for photography.
Yeah, right. So that's your sort of go-to if you, got
it nothing. Absolutely is. Yeah. If it's the night before and I'm deciding to go shoot, it's often, it's there up in Rocky Mountain National Park. I also we have the Flatirons here in Boulder, Colorado. Okay, yeah. And they're beautiful. And so there are definitely mornings in summer when the flowers are out that, that my only goal is just to go there and try different shots with different light of the Flatirons. I love getting them in each season. They're incredible with snow on them. So it's fun that there's so much beauty right here in Boulder, and there's a lot of hiking trails right here. But if I'm going up to Rocky Mountain National Park, there's an area called Brainerd Lake. That's another beautiful area that I used to go to a lot. We're now hitting the point of needing permits everywhere, and it's getting harder.
That's something that I want to talk a little bit about. One of the things I've spoken to a number of other landscape photographers about, particularly in the US, but it's also an issue here, is just the amount of people visiting some of these areas now, simply because of the exposure they've got on social media, is exponentially just increased, and everybody having a camera in their phone and etc. It's just exponentially increased the number of people visiting some of these locations. So, talk to me a little bit about the permit system over there, and how that works, and how that works for landscape photography in particular, because surely you can't always, not everyone can get that blue hour time slot,
No, so the way they've done it here, and it started with COVID. So it started that summer. We hadn't had the permits before, but they wanted to have less people in the park, less people interacting. And so they went to this permit system.
Okay.
And then realized it worked well, and they kept it, and now I don't think it's going away. And then last year, a couple other popular areas are the Brainerd Lake Recreation Area, and then Mount Evans is a very popular, we call them 14ers here in Colorado, mountains that are above 14,000 feet. I know it's not a common term for people around the world necessarily, but it's a 14er here, and there's mountain goats at the top, and it's just beautiful landscape, opportunities for wildlife, but they switched to permits too. And so those are kind of a lot of, I would say a lot of our go-to spots.
Yeah.
And so suddenly they're all permitted, and, you need to completely either plan ahead or be ready to, one thing that's been great about the park, Rocky Mountain, is that they do release a couple hundred each night before at a certain time. And I have found if I'm ready on the computer, right when they release the couple hundred, I often can get one.
Okay.
And so that's been really helpful. The other option is, in the beginning, it wasn't a big deal because the permit started at 6 a.m. and you needed to be there by then anyway. But now it's 5 a.m. and you don't need to be there that early.
Right. Yeah.
You don't want to be there that early. So that is an option, though. A lot of people
unless you do an astro, I guess.
Exactly. If you could be up there for astro already, but you can go in after hours. So the permits generally run from 5 a.m. to I think 6 or 7 p.m. I think it was 6, and then they pushed it to 7 last summer, and it was easier to kind of work around it a little.
Got it. Yeah. So their access. Sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say it is definitely difficult. And at the same time, though, there are so many people. I mean, we live in a pretty decent metropolitan suburban area now with a lot of, just urban sprawl, and everything's gotten more crowded. So I kind of don't know if there's a better solution, because we also need to protect the lands we want to use and photograph on and hike on and everything. So, I think they've done a good job with it. I think it's hard for all of us who have been doing photography, and even before I did photography, my husband did. So I'd get up with him and go, so it's been years, and with our boys of traveling in all these places where there was never an issue with people, to suddenly have all these crowds, it's not going to go away, though.
No, I don't think it will.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the interesting dichotomy is, yes, you want these things to be popular because you want them to be protected, but the popularization of them sort of then can lead to damage being done to them simply because of the number of people visiting. And I was going to ask, have you noticed any locations in particular that have been, had that kind of damage done to them?
I definitely have. So one of the places, we have a photo hanging in our house that my husband took of a very, popular scene in Grand Teton National Park of the Molten Barn. It's this barn, the Tetons behind it. It's a very popular spot. But, when we used to go there when our boys were really little, they're older now. I'm older. So, I'm really talking 15 to 20 years ago. Both my boys are 20 and 22. So when we were going when they were young, we have this photo that my husband took, and there's there's the barn and the mountains, and then in front of the barn is just this beautiful tall grass. Yeah. Just the whole foreground is this tall grass. And that is just gone. You can't ever take that photo again, because it has just been trampled so much that grass isn't even growing there. It's just dirt. Wow. And there might be really short grass in places. So it's grass and dirt. But I didn't even realize that until one day I just looked at that photo, and it kind of clicked. I was like, wow, you can't take that photo.
Yeah.
That may not exist unless they decide to close it off at some point
put a fence around it.
That's probably where some stuff will be headed. But that's one area. The Maroon Bells up near Aspen, Colorado, is another area that we have watched. just a lot of damage happened. So many photographers in the fall that line up there and, have just eroded the shoreline and all the plants that were kind of along the shoreline. And we see it a lot.
And I'm not trying to try and find a solution for it, but it's just interesting, I guess, to talk to people and understand how these places, how the impact of social media popularity is impacted some of these places. And
definitely,
basically the only thing I can think of, as I said before, was you start to put fencing in, and that then that causes its own visual nightmares.
Right. I think the permitting can work well. An area that I've always been very focused on is education in my own social media and writing articles. Is to try to just help educate people on how important it is to take care of these areas we love to photograph, because even as photographers, we've seen, so many more photographers come in and we're just overcrowding these areas. And I think education plays a big part. And so I try to do that. If I post, I haven't been good about posting on social media, but when I do a post like on Instagram of a shot taken in the alpine tundra in Rocky Mountain National Park, I'll talk about the tundra in the post and explain how it takes years for these fragile plants to come back, and that it's a very delicate ecosystem. And I've had people be like, I had no idea, because I'm like, stay on the trails because they're not marked well up there. And I can see how that's an easy one for people to just walk on without even realizing. And so I've tried to focus on education. I think is if we can do that as photographers who are out in the field a lot, it can make a difference.
Definitely. And I totally agree and support that. It's one of the best things you can do in terms of education is, use the social media to educate people. In terms of traveling around, are you sort of restricting yourself? Obviously, the last few years has been a bit of an exception because nobody's really been able to go anywhere. But have you been restricting yourself to the US and Canada, or are you gone further afield?
Unfortunately, I haven't been able to travel a lot. There are areas I'm dying to explore. Australia, New Zealand being a couple of them. Europe, I've really only spent time in France. We've been to Africa a couple times, so we've done a safari there.
Nice.
But for the most part, I kind of say that my photography is Western United States. It's really, my focus is, Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, Utah. But then I also spent a lot of time in Southern California at the beach and in Maui in Hawaii. So I also do a lot of photography, a lot of seascapes too. So and I love, seascapes, I think I enjoy even more than like a mountain scene.
Really?
I think in terms of the actual photography.
Yeah.
I like doing long exposure with clouds and stuff, but doing it with water and waves is one of my favorite things to shoot.
It's got a certain dynamism, and it does sort of change the look of that seascape. You take a short exposure and you can see every ripple. But you get into long exposure, you can just see where the water actually moves, I think. And it's one of the reasons why I love it too. It's probably my favourite type.
Yeah, is it?
Then I live in a place where there's something like 42 beaches within an hour of me. So.
Yeah, it's always changing. And I know the clouds are and the sky is too, but you have those mornings where it's just a blue sky, and there's not a lot you can change. Where with the ocean and the waves, there's just so much movement to capture. I really enjoy that. So that is more my focus. I would love to travel more. I don't know. We just haven't been able to do much international travel.
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone has the last couple of years. I've got a trip to the UK coming up because my wife's from the UK. So trying to organise a trip into the Lake District up there if I can.
Oh, so, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I've heard that's
looking
really
forward
beautiful.
to that. But yeah, haven't had any opportunity to get out for a while. I guess in terms of that, has COVID and the pandemic had any impact on your thinking around travelling and photography in particular?
Not really. I found that first summer of COVID, I actually was out doing photography almost more than I ever had before, because everything, our trips had been canceled.
Nothing else to do.
Yeah, we had a trip planned to like all the Washington national parks and another trip to Maui planned. And so we didn't do those. And we ended up renting a place just up in Estes Park in Rocky. We were only on like lockdown here from mid-March to really like mid-May, I think.
Okay.
So yeah. We were allowed to travel locally, I wasn't flying anywhere or anything, but I spent so much time in Rocky Mountain National Park that summer. And then we did some backpacking in Wyoming. We're able to go backpacking in the Wind River Range, which had been something we'd been wanting to do, but we just never had time for that, shorter trip up there, because each summer we had these bigger trips planned. And so I look back on my photos from that summer and I was like, wow, that first summer of COVID was excellent in terms of photography. And, you're outside. So I would go by myself. I'd photograph by myself. It felt very safe. It felt like such an escape and a release during that time.
Absolutely. Yeah. We went through a fairly nasty period of lockdown.
I remember that.
It was 165 days of
that's really long.
Not being able to go more than 5Ks from my front door. So
do you have a beach within that distance?
Nope. I live in western suburban Sydney, which is very suburban.
Right.
Lots of street lights and telegraph poles and houses and fences to shoot, but they're not very.
Right. That's a really long time.
Near me, which has a little brown stream that runs through it, and it's
right.
sort of muddy and sluggish, and it doesn't move much.
Yeah, that is a very long time to be in lockdown. And
it's why I started the podcast, really.
That's excellent.
So I got something out of it, I guess.
Yeah. So, I think those 2 months, well, and the crazy part was, I guess we'd had them 1 year before, but we have about an acre of a lot, and behind our lot is a little stream that runs between the houses that are behind us and us. There's this little creek, and we had a fox den. And so I was able to, for like a solid month, just take fox photos from my yard.
Right. Okay.
During lockdown, which I was just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like there is something in my yard.
That's nice. Yeah. I wish I've got some plants and trees in the yard, and I suppose I could have got into macro flowers.
I did do that. I did more macro.
Yeah.
I definitely did macro around our neighborhood in my yard, and I found myself, I just recently deleted all these squirrel photos. I was clearly very bored, and I decided that our squirrels were very cute and photogenic, and they were something I could do.
Sure.
But in terms of, it definitely impacted our travel, really till we got vaccinated and everything. And then now, my other part-time job is a nonprofit that we run. And so I think the reason I don't often have a lot of time for international is that we travel to Africa for that. And so when we're doing huge trips, they're often tied into our nonprofit. So I'm hoping we get to travel more now that our boys are both college age and COVID is, we're able to travel again. Yeah, I know, exactly. So hopefully we'll get to do more.
Yeah. So what motivates you creatively? I guess, obviously the landscape and wildlife is a big part of that. But what is it behind that? What is it about that really makes you want to create art out of it, as opposed to just, you can do wildlife photography, which is just recording there's an animal there in its habitat, but then there's making that into art, and I guess that's the bit that I'm really interested in.
That's a good question. I clearly go out and do it because I love nature and I feel whole when I'm in nature. Like there's no other time that I feel as at peace and content and free of everything than when I'm in the mountains. I think it started with really wanting to I don't know, wildlife. It was just more like, this is so much fun. I love these animals. I want to be able to print these for our house, so it kind of started with that. Landscapes, I think, somewhat was tied a little bit to like trips we took, like wanting to capture and edit something that was a memory, that really captured the memory of a trip we took. But I don't know that I can come up with an actual answer on why I love to turn it into art, because I do all these solo trips where there aren't moments I necessarily need to capture. But I just love taking photos and coming home and
I guess that leads to the question, when you're going out, are you thinking about it as as a production of art, as in, are you thinking about how can I use that color or that light or whatever to, really bring together a piece?
It definitely am. And I don't know if, probably when I started out, I wasn't as much. I didn't, because I don't think most people start out with like all the gear just laying at their feet when they head out. So I have kind of a unique start to it, right? That I just took the gear and went out. So I didn't really completely understand light and how important that was in the beginning. And so yes, I'm always, I don't think you can be a photographer without having light be absolutely central to everything.
Totally.
Everything that you do. So yeah, I'm definitely always looking for what I think will look good in a composition and a photo. For me, composition has come a lot more naturally than the technical side of photography. So I feel like I do somewhat naturally see the exact composition instantly that I want. And then I'll work with it and I'll move and I'll do things that aren't as comfortable for me. But I feel like I can visualize, what I want pretty quickly.
Yep.
I have a harder time with everything with a camera.
Okay.
Just everything technical is harder for me. So that part's, taken more learning probably.
I'm going to say the results are pretty good.
Well, thank you. So I obviously light, color. Fall is my favorite time.
Sure.
Just the amount of color. I just don't feel like you can beat it. And
you mentioned printing before. Do you print much of your work, or do you, and what format are you doing? Sort of large scale, or are you doing photo books for yourself, or?
I've done all the photo books I've kind of done have been really just family trips and stuff. I do a lot of I do card sets. That's been something that everyone I know has loved. So, I'll do a wildlife card set, a seascapes, landscapes. And so I print for cards a lot. And then I print more large format for our home, but we don't have room anymore.
Run out of wall space.
Yeah, we don't really have more wall space. We just built this she shed.
Add on or put another level on.
Well, we just built at Christmas that I'm in a she shed right now. That is my office, and we built that, and so I was all excited because I got to print some pieces, for that. And then really the other printing I've really done are just for people purchasing my work and with getting into NFTs, my collectors. And I print a lot on metal and acrylic. Okay.
Well, I was going to ask what you go to in terms of your format.
Probably acrylic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's my favorite, but like out here, the walls are really thin. So I had to print metal.
Yeah. Got
I don't print prints as much anymore. I really love these other mediums.
Yeah, fair enough. What's your routine when you're out in the fields? What are you looking for in terms of you mentioned being able to see that composition? What are you looking for? What are the elements, I guess, and can you break that down a little bit into? Are you looking for shape or light or combinations of the two? Or
I think I've realized my favorite thing is reflection. So
okay. Yep.
I don't know, 4 out of 5 times in I'm picking a lake, a river, something that I know will pick up the reflection of the mountains and the water.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times I kind of make it a little more narrow of what I'm doing based on how much I've found I love reflection. So I tend to go to any places where I can have any kind of water, even if it's like, I remember at the barn in the Tetons, it had rained and I was able to get on the ground and, use a puddle to get the reflection of the barn and the mountains. And, so I'm very drawn to reflection. So I am drawn to water. And so I'll do that a lot. And then obviously light, a lot of times, I'm sure you've had this experience, you have your scene in front of you, you know exactly what you're trying to capture, and then the light's behind you.
Yeah.
And you're like, perfect, the perfect light, the perfect color, everything is behind me where the mountains are not. And so then I find that I'm, kind of just scrambling to, kind of just come up with a composition that will work to capture that light or the color in the sky. And maybe that's just a couple trees or the hills, and and so those times you're more just kind of flying, looking around like what can I capture to get what is the most beautiful right now, which is that sky, that light behind me, of course not in front of me where I want it.
Not behind that mountain or behind that set of trees or whatever it is that you
so I'm obviously always chasing the light, but I really do love reflection.
Yeah, well, for me, seascapes are usually spot by cloud on the horizon.
Mm-hmm.
So you go there and you've got some, nice layer of high cloud, and then a gap, and then this big thick chunk of cloud right across the horizon.
That's perfect.
It just messes you up.
The elements don't like to cooperate a lot of the time.
No, that's the fun of photography.
It is. I mean, if we knew every time we went out we could capture a perfect shot with our clouds exactly where we wanted them.
Yeah, if the sunrise was a banger every morning,
exactly, there would be no challenge.
The shots wouldn't be interesting either because everyone could take them.
Right. Exactly. So
So what about processing when you get home? Are you straight into it, or do you let things gestate for a while? And what's kind of your not detailed workflow, but what's your general workflow?
So I mentioned I'm impatient. I get home and I want to see them right away. So if I'm home, I mean, I generally always have a laptop on my trips. I do the same thing. I think also because of how I just taught myself in the beginning, I had enough experiences, especially with wildlife in the beginning, where I thought for sure I had just gotten the most amazing shot, just perfectly focused. And then I'd come home and they'd be blurry I didn't have my settings right, or, and I would be so disappointed. And so I think that actually probably played into why I always want to see them right away. I don't need to edit them right away, but I'll put them on the computer and I'll just take like the exposure and slide it way up so I can just see, like if it was like a darker morning, I'll just slide it up to see if it's clear enough. And then, so I definitely look at them right away. I don't edit them all right away, but I know I have a lot of friends who sit and who wait 6 months before they edit photos, or they'll edit 2 or 3 photos and then they go back. I'm more likely to focus on that trip or that period of time and really go through them all and pull the ones that I like. And then I'll revisit them later I'll go back, but I definitely tend to kind of go through and know fairly quickly which ones are ones I'm going to want to work on.
Yeah. So you mentioned you learnt all of this sort of from scratch on your own. Was it just sort of bumping around and making those errors, and then how did you learn to fix them, I guess?
So I guess I learned a lot from my mistakes. I think in the beginning, especially with wildlife, I just didn't understand all the components and
Yep.
and everything. And so I think how I started was really realizing, like, okay, I'm not happy with any of these photos. What did I do wrong? And then I'd start looking at, or I'd ask my husband, what I do wrong here. And he'd say, well, you didn't have your aperture right, or your ISO wasn't right. You needed to be higher with this light. Your ISO needed to be higher. And so then I would Google, I would just start Googling, okay, how to photograph elk in low light, or, literally like just very random, everything you can plug into Google. And then I would just, I would watch YouTube videos and tutorials. I really, really want to spend more time on editing tutorials.
Okay.
I would really like to up my editing game. I feel like I have a lot to learn there still.
Right.
And so I'd really like to make time for that. But as far as like learning my camera, learning the settings, it was just a lot of watching videos, learning from mistakes. I still make mistakes. Wildlife's hard for me.
I think every photographer, nobody shows them, but every photographer.
Right. I could show you lots of blurry photos of animals.
I had a repair done on my camera a few months ago, and I got it back from the shop and took it out for a shoot the day after, and didn't realize that they defaulted everything. So the default was shooting JPEG, not RAW.
Oh no.
So I came back and I'd sort of half climbed down a cliff into a slot canyon to take this shot of a waterfall and everything. And I got back and it was like, I can't really edit these the way that I normally do because they're just JPEG.
Oh, that's the
worst. They're okay, but
right. I know those things are so fun. Like that's such a bummer. I went, and you don't make the mistake again though, once you've made it, right? I went up to Rocky, and I don't remember what I had done, why I only had, because we have a couple cameras and, different gear. This shouldn't have happened, but I think I only took one camera. I just took like a backpack of gear, and I started shooting at this lake at sunrise, and it was beautiful. And I'm like, where's the photo? Like, it's not there. And I open it and I don't have a single card, and I have no backup cards. I don't have any in the car. I'm in, 45 minutes at this point, an hour from home. And I'm like,
the light's not
I have no cards. I'm going to shoot on my iPhone for fun today, and I've never forgotten to make sure the cameras have cards since.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to take the tripod foot on the bottom of the camera. It was on a different body, so I took a different body and got out to the location and was about to screw it on, and I'm going, okay, I'm going handheld.
I've done that more than one time. So when I say you don't make them,
I was there at sort of nautical twilight, so this is just before blue hour starts.
Right.
And so there was, you cannot literally, well, without putting it on the ground and seascaping, that's not a great idea.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
I hate for about an hour before I could actually take any shots.
I hate to admit I've done that one several times because I'm so often moving between tripods and cameras. I have one that I shoot wildlife with and one landscape and a couple different tripods. And that's one I've made several times.
Yeah. So just on processing, how long would you spend on an image? Would you're there for hours with multiple layers, or are you just sort of, bang?
What do you think?
You're impatient, so I got an idea.
I think there's two reasons for it. I think I am somewhat impatient and I like to just edit quickly and move on. But part of it is I don't think I have the editing skill that would allow me to work on an image for 2 hours. I wouldn't know what to do anymore.
Yeah.
So I think probably my average time for a photo that I'm going to print, going to put up for sale, anything like that, I'd say I spend 25 to 30 minutes.
Wow. Okay.
But I know a lot of people will spend 2 to 3 hours.
Oh yeah, no, I know.
I'm also, though, I'm a very realistic editor. I don't, I try to really show the scene I saw.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times that is fairly easy for me to, to be like, well, no, it was like this, it was this, and, and kind of create that. So I'm not someone who does a lot of post-processing and is really creative. And, I'm always, I think just my goal is to always try to pull the viewer into the scene that I saw.
Yep.
And so I think that's what has kind of led to my more realistic, style. And then also probably the fact that there's more I could learn and I could become more creative, but that's the style I've kind of chosen to go with, and the way I wanted people to see my work.
Yep.
Has actually probably kept me from learning a lot more that I would like to learn. I know there's so many tools that I use.
The thing is both Lightroom and Photoshop are just so deep and so wide. It's right. There's always 14 different ways of doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah. So that's something I hope to spend more time on soon.
Yeah. So do you find that your shooting style influences that editing style, or vice versa? Or is it more that you're shooting and I guess are you obviously if you've got an image where you need to photo stack, you're doing that sort of thing, but are you doing much image blending for high dynamic range, or are you using filters and you're shooting to try and get the shot in one exposure?
I use a lot of filters, definitely, especially obviously for anything long exposure, but I do stacking. I don't really do blending. I just haven't really learned enough to do that. So I definitely do the stacking where you focus on the sky and then you focus on the foreground and
yeah, right,
stack them, get them to work together and everything. But not much beyond that.
Okay, cool. What's the most notable experience you've had while you're in your photography career?
Most notable?
Yeah.
Like out in the field kind of thing?
Well, it doesn't have to be out in the field. Could be at home.
Yeah. I'm honestly, and I won't go into these because they're more wildlife, but probably a few moments I've had with wildlife that were unexpected, because also same kind of issue with crowds now. We're having that with wildlife. So when you're in the Tetons and you're used to finding a moose and having a handful of photographers, there's now 50.
Yeah,
and
right.
It's really impacted my desire to want to photograph. If there's that many people around an animal, I just keep going. I don't enjoy that. And so that's gotten harder.
Experience would be that great.
Right. So it's definitely hard. And I mean, sometimes, you end up with a lot of people, but I try to, limit the amount of people I'm with. So some of those experiences where I've come across wildlife, that's just, just such a perfect situation. And there are times that I haven't shot it too, that I've just sat there and watched this creature just for the experience too. And I've really enjoyed that. With landscapes, probably for me, the one that stands out the most is, it was actually during COVID, when we didn't want to be flying, but I had to fly back to California to say goodbye to my mom. She had frontal temporal dementia, and she'd been sick for a while, and she was in full-time care at this point. We had full-time care at home, but we had to, eventually move her. And so I flew out to say goodbye to her, and my brother, dad, and I all went and did that. And it was obviously extremely emotional. And I grew up there on the beaches in Southern California. We had a little beach cottage that we lived at during summers. And I grew up, just in this whole area of Newport Beach along the ocean. And so I just needed to be alone that evening. I was staying at my dad's, and I just took my camera and went to the Newport Pier, which I've, been at so many times with my mom growing up. And, and I just sat up my camera and stood. I remember that I was in a longer skirt, like just a skirt and t-shirt, and that I just stood in the waves. Like I just didn't care. I had my tripod in the water. The waves were coming up fairly high on the tripod. My skirt was halfway, just soaked. And I stood there crying and shooting long exposure photos of the water at sunset hitting the pier. And it was really beautiful. It was a real like healing moment of kind of just really remembering my mom and thinking about all of our time, because I really cannot be on the beach without thinking about her, because she raised me on them. So that was a really, really meaningful moment. Really special evening and it was crazy because I remember being disappointed because there was a wildfire up near Los Angeles, and I was like, oh, it's going to be too smoky, and and then how sometimes that smoke can create such interesting color, and the sun was like, the sun was orange, and there were layers of kind of pink orange with the blue water, and
like the tobacco filters you can get on your
right.
without
without
having to use the glass.
Right. So it was just a really beautiful night, and
sounds like a wonderful memory.
I've realized how much photography can be therapy. And how much just being alone in nature with a camera can just help me process and help me work through hard stuff too.
Well, I think I forget exactly where I read it. There has been some studies done on things like flow state and the therapeutic sort of benefits that come from getting into that state of, whether it's music or photography or art or whatever, the people, the serotonin and whatever that's actually released into your brain actually just has this wonderful effect, but you've got to get to that point where you can actually get into the flow state
definitely. And I just don't think, I didn't know that existed. I've spent the first, 3/4 of my life or whatever, having no idea that was a thing. I'm not, I was an artist a bit as a kid. I was good at drawing and painting until I got to about high school. And then I just didn't really, didn't have the interest. It didn't pass on. And I just never thought I was creative. And so I think I kind of assumed I just, didn't have that side in me until I was really, handed a camera and discovered that. And I just can't imagine life without it.
No, nor can I. It's funny. I do remember experiences like that in childhood, like making model aeroplanes or model ships or whatever, and painting them, and you just got so focused on what you were doing that the entire time and the rest of the world just didn't matter. And at the time certainly didn't recognize it as that sort of flow state, but now that I've now that I'm nearly 60 and learned a lot more around the world, it's it's really recognizable as being that state where you just sort of everything else shuts off, time doesn't matter, other pressures don't matter.
The only time I'd ever really kind of felt that is I was a swimmer growing up, and my best friend and I used to do ocean workouts where we would just swim like pier to pier. And it was that same kind of feeling where nothing else existed. And, you were in the water. I was with her, but we were not, interacting. So you just kind of hit that same thing where everything else went away. That was kind of the closest feeling I'd had to it.
Yeah. Would you say you've learned anything about the world through photography?
That's a good question.
That's why I asked.
I think one thing, and this goes back to even how I started, I think I've learned to find beauty all around us. I don't know that I had the eye for that before. My son was so sick and we were home all the time and he couldn't get out of bed. And, I realized that you could find beauty in the simplest things. And, you know, it would be something silly, like literally the sun streaming through, hitting the dog on the floor. Like, you know, it would be something that's like, you know, that's not a big deal, but I started just seeing beauty around me and looking for it. You know, I really started training my eye at that point to look for beauty around me. And I think that's helped me with photography, just that there is beauty everywhere. There's beauty in people everywhere. I'm not a people photographer, but I see it all the time, you know, and there's so much beauty in this world. And, you know, even things that aren't beautiful, you can find a creative angle on it. And, you know, and that's been fun. I mean, I realized, you know, even in like some of the national parks, I found myself, you know, like I'm getting gas somewhere and you'll see some of the old trucks that are just like parked there. And I'll look at one of them and it's, you know, it's a 60, 70-year-old bus from the park. And suddenly I'm taking photos of it. And it's not anything that I do, but I find that I'm drawn to like the beauty of a historical structure, you know, and so I think that that's something I've learned, is just how much beauty there is around us if we choose to see it.
Yeah. I think that's a really important thing that a lot of people don't get about, you know, that aren't photographers don't get about, you know, how photography makes you think about the world or look at the world. Because, you know, I mean, I've seen some stunningly beautiful photos of decaying buildings, you know, by exploration photographers. And, you know, it's just the colors, the compositions that they've managed to create, even though this, you know, if you walked in there and you looked at it and you go, I don't really want to be here, you know. It's an uncomfortable place to be, but yet it can be truly beautiful, you know.
Right. And I feel like I saw some of that. I do think being on Twitter this last year has helped me with that, because I think in Instagram, I really kind of created this landscape wildlife circle, and that's all I saw. And so I've been exposed just through making so many friends through Twitter and stuff with street photography, urban exploration, you know, all of that I am seeing beauty even that I never would have seen before. And that's kind of exciting, because I'm like, oh my gosh, that opens up, you know, more opportunities to just explore with your camera when you're different places. You know, one of the things I found too is how much I want to just take photos of everything when we're in Africa. And that I have to be very careful with the cultures and the people there to not be taking photos of people who don't want me to. And, you know, and to just be really sensitive to that with people, since I don't generally, you know, photograph people. But just, you know, it's, you're so drawn into different cultures with different fabrics and colors, and, you know, but then also there's just so much you need to be careful of and sure you're being aware of when you're shooting another culture.
I think particularly if you're doing street photography, you know, and it doesn't matter which culture you're in, being respectful to, you know, people.
Absolutely.
That say, look, I don't want my photo being taken, and, you know, stay away.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's probably.
Yeah. Have you ever hit a creative wall? And if so, how did you handle it?
I hit a really big creative wall last spring. And I think as I look back on it, I think it was also, you know, this past spring, a year ago. Okay. When was that? So we really were only a year into COVID, I guess, but it had been a rough year.
To be honest, I think the last 2 years, 3 years now have actually only been a month.
Exactly. It's all just like gone together. But so, I had a lot of just a lot of personal stuff to deal with that first year, stuff within our family, losing my mom, COVID, being locked down, having more anxiety. I tend to have anxiety and depression. And so that brings out more anxiety in me. So I think that probably did impact my wall a bit, was just that my life was feeling kind of, you know, difficult and out of control. I have found that for me, when I've hit walls several times, but this one was like a big one where I was like, wow, I don't want to pick up a camera. And I just didn't for a couple months. And I think that's fine too, to feel like I need a break. I don't feel creative, and I don't necessarily want to feel creative, but I have found that I use macro photography to pull me out of those ruts and help me be creative again, because I don't do macro photography on a regular basis. It just starts working my brain in a different way. And I can do that right at home. There's plenty of in spring and summer, there's enough around for me to just focus on right here. So I would start with just 20 minutes walking around my yard and our side field in the creek. And then within that same week, I would tell myself, okay, you have to go to the mountains, but only with your macro lens. Don't even take other lenses. And then I'd go on a hike, and mainly just flowers or bark or lichen, I just would find these things that, and I enjoy that. And I think there's so many beautiful macro shots, but it's not generally my thing. But I have found that it helps something in my brain kind of switch back into a creative mode, and in a way that it's not what I'm used to doing on a regular basis. So I'm not frustrated with myself. I'm not, if I can't get a macro shot perfect, or if something's blurry, I'm like, well, I'm not really, macro isn't my specialty, but I'm really enjoying it. And so I have found that has worked to pull me out of it.
Yeah. Okay. What's your favorite thing about being a photographer?
Being in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And I love as I've been able to kind of make this a part-time job this last year and a half, I love that, I actually, my husband's encouraging me, even oh yeah, get out there, get more photos, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much freedom to just go spend time in nature.
Nice.
That's how I started. That's kind of what led me into it, is just my love for nature. And that's why I love it. It encourages me to get out and do more than I think I would without a camera.
Yeah, right. So what about the least favorite thing?
The camera itself.
Okay.
And I know that's not a normal one for people, but I can get very frustrated with my camera and with feeling like I'm really dumb. And why is this hard for me? And I hit a button. What button did I hit? What did I do that changed this setting? And and I know it probably makes me sound so dumb as a photographer, but it has been my brain just does not operate that way.
Right.
And that is a challenge for me, is learning everything about a camera, where I know with so many people that is so natural.
Yeah.
It's challenging for me, and I don't like it. So, I want to just have a simple process that I know and that I don't have to learn a lot about. So yeah, my camera frustrates me.
Okay. Well.
I know, that's probably pretty sad.
No, I just find it intriguing. Yeah. It sounds like the interface that they've built for your camera has probably got some problems. I'm not going to ask which one it is.
No, it's me. It's very much me.
Okay.
No, I have it working fine for me, but I just have realized that I get very frustrated with trying to figure out, because I don't know. I bump it all the time. I do things all the time. And then I'm like, what did I do? And
oh yeah, I'm constantly forgetting to turn it off before I stick it back in the bag. And then, either rubbing it on the side of the bag or my thumb or one of my fingers will hit a button and I'll pull it out. They're not the settings. It takes
exactly.
Hey, what?
And probably I like to blame the camera if I go out and start shooting something and my aperture is totally wrong. It was because I was just shooting an elk and now I'm shooting mountains, but it's not my fault that I didn't look at it. I just jumped in and started shooting.
Wants a camera that knows what you're shooting, so that
exactly. All this AI with cameras now is excellent. So
absolutely, yeah. Well, I remember talking to somebody before that was saying in terms of their processing, they just want to be able to say, process the image, like Star Trek.
Exactly.
You put it into the computer and then you tell it what you want and it'll come out.
Right. And it's funny, as much as I feel like I do have a lot more I could learn with editing, I do really enjoy editing. So that's enjoyable. I love that time. I have to have loud music on, and love just being alone with music and editing, and kind of in a way you get in that a different kind of flow state with that.
Yeah. What would you tell somebody that was thinking of starting out to get into landscape photography, either as a career or as a hobby?
Well, I would definitely tell them to educate themselves about all the places they're going to start going, and to make sure that they really know rules and regulations and are following them, because not only is it for our safety and everything, but it's to protect species and lands and ecosystems and everything. So that's always a big part of what I'm going to share with people. And then I think, honestly, if I had friends that were like, I just want to get a camera and start being a landscape photographer, I'm going to encourage them to start getting up early at sunrise and just going out with their iPhone. Yep. I think that you can learn a lot about if this is something you want to do or not with just your phone, because I don't think anyone should this gear is expensive. It's you invest a lot. And so I don't think anyone should be investing in this hobby, profession, whatever it is, without really kind of seeing, do you like being outside this much? Are you all, if they're already a climber, a hiker, a camper, all those things, and they're used to getting up early and they're used to inclement weather and all of that, I'm going to be a lot more likely to be like, oh yeah, get a camera, let's go, But if they don't have all that experience, they have to, I think, first just have the experience, and you can do that with your phone and see if it's something you enjoy. Do you enjoy, because if you don't enjoy being there in that moment, you're not going to enjoy
time.
Yeah. So I think that's probably what I would.
Okay, great advice. Great advice. What do you like to do when you're not out shooting?
I like to hike. I still like to be out in nature. So I like to hike. I like to just be with my family. My family is very outdoorsy, so if I'm going to be with my family, we're generally
probably on a hike somewhere.
Yeah. Although I do actually really enjoy going climbing with my guys. I don't really climb. I climbed when I was younger. So I have a fusion and I have chronic back pain.
Okay.
And it was fun, but it's not like a passion for me like it is for both my boys and my husband. But I really enjoy, just going and hanging out somewhere beautiful with them while they climb. And often I'll have a book or, and just being with them and experiencing it with them. I love doing that. When the weather's not great, what do? I love to read, but I don't feel like I've been reading. Somehow something with COVID made it hard for me to read. Those first few months, I couldn't focus. I kept trying to read, and I just couldn't focus. And so I haven't been great at reading these last 2 years, but that's always been something I've loved.
Yeah. I've been trying to get back into that myself recently, and I kind of understand what you're talking about with COVID. I think the first I'd say 12 months, it was difficult to concentrate on anything.
It really was. It was so crazy.
Yeah, there was just so much going on, I guess. So are there any photographers out there that you think I should be talking to on the podcast?
Well, I always am going to recommend my friend Kristen Ryan, who you've probably maybe not heard of or maybe have. I don't know. She's not on Twitter really.
Kristen. Yeah.
Okay. So Kristen is she's my mentor. She's been my mentor. So while I was self-taught when it comes to things like long exposure and learning how to use filters and everything, Kristen taught me. I've taken classes from her online, in person, and we just shoot together now when we end up in the Tetons together, where we cross over at least a day that we can shoot together each time. So she's really been my mentor. I think she's an incredible photographer. Tara Workman, I don't know if you've.
Yeah, no, I've spoken to her on in Twitter Spaces a couple of times.
Okay.
I haven't actually had her on the podcast.
I adore
she's
her.
On my list already.
Okay, I think she'd be excellent.
Yeah.
So Kristen and Tara would be too.
Okay.
I don't know.
No, that'll do.
Okay.
All right. I said before we started that I've got a really important issue to ask you about as well.
Right. You had me a little nervous with that one.
No, it's nothing to be nervous about. But I know it can be quite a divisive issue, and there's it's not restricted to the photography community, but it can be quite divisive. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
I knew that was going to be it. I almost just said that. Is this the pineapple question?
Yes, of course it's a pineapple question.
I don't know why this is such a thing with photographers. It's so funny.
A lot of people, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely no pineapple on pizza.
No. You're a flat no.
No. I'm a flat no, never.
If there's a piece of a wine sitting on the table, you're not into it.
No, but I have to add a little caveat that I don't like pizza very much.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's a little bit easier for me to say no. I'm an absolute
that's another
no.
divisive issue entirely.
Yeah, exactly. So no, we have this. I have this group of friends from Clubhouse days and Twitter, and this comes up like once a month, and we're all arguing about pineapple on pizza. But and I think we're fairly evenly split, actually.
Yeah, I haven't actually gone back. This is episode 45, I think.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. That's a lot.
Thank you. But I haven't actually gone back and done the numbers. I think I might do it at episode 50 and see where we stand and see whether or not we've got a...
Is it weighed heavily one way or the other, you think?
I don't know, because I've not actually gone back to listen to everybody.
Right.
And I haven't recorded it anywhere yet. So.
Yeah, no, I'm a strong no.
Okay. I'll remember that if we're ever having pizza. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me, Brynn.
Thank you so much, Grant. It's been really fun.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun getting to know you. Where can people find your work?
I have a website. It's flatironsphotography.com. It has some of my husband's work as well. So that's why we just call it Flatirons Photography. I'm on Instagram at Brynn Alise Photography, on Twitter at Brynn Alise Photo. Pretty much Brynn Alise everywhere.
Fair enough. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening, because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.